In the early history of cinema, few directors commanded shadow and light quite like Friedrich Wilhelm Murnau. He built his massive reputation by shaping the eerie, jagged aesthetics of German Expressionism. That mastery of mood allowed him to cross the Atlantic and successfully conquer the highly controlled Hollywood studios, where every light and set piece could be micromanaged. Yet, despite his critical and commercial success, Murnau felt an escalating restlessness. The perfectly constructed sound stages were beginning to feel less like a canvas and more like a cage. He was exhausted by the artificiality of the studio lot. He wanted to capture something raw, a more primal and authentic reality that couldn't be built out of plywood and painted backdrops. That yearning for unvarnished truth drove him to leave the safety of his Hollywood contracts entirely. He locked his sights on a destination far from the studios, setting the stage for his final, fateful project. This philosophical departure required a massive physical journey. Murnau traveled across the globe, leaving modern civilization behind for the remote ocean. His specific destination was the untamed islands of French Polynesia, where he planned to shoot his new film, Tabu. From its very conception, Tabu was designed as a radical experiment in cinematic naturalism. There would be no studio executives, no painted backdrops, and no artificial safety nets. But by completely abandoning the studio vacuum, Murnau unknowingly traded his absolute directorial control for the chaotic, unpredictable forces of nature. To pull off this massive undertaking, Murnau partnered with Robert Flaherty, a legendary filmmaker famous for his pioneering work in documentaries. Flaherty had a very specific objective. He wanted to point the camera and passively observe, capturing a pure, unscripted record of island life exactly as it unfolded. Murnau, however, demanded structure. He insisted on an active, scripted narrative, a dark story revolving around cursed local traditions, a forbidden love, and an inescapable fate. These conflicting approaches meant the two men were entirely incompatible. They mixed like oil and water, arguing constantly over the soul of the film. Ultimately, Murnau's obsession with narrative control won out. He proved he couldn't simply document reality, he was compelled to force a tragedy upon it. Murnau took full financial control of the project, pushed Flaherty to the sidelines, and cast local non-professionals to act out his dark, meticulously planned vision. The shoot immediately deteriorated. The crew battled severe tropical illnesses, and the persistent humidity wrecked their technical equipment. To make matters worse, eerie rumors began circulating among the locals that the film crew had disturbed sacred burial grounds, layering a thick sense of dread over the entire production. Through it all, Murnau remained uncompromising. He manipulated the harsh Pacific sunlight with reflectors and screens, painstakingly replicating the exact high-contrast shadows he used to build in Berlin. In his desperate search for pure, untouched naturalism, Murnau had ironically turned the wild Pacific into his own private, highly controlled soundstage. The final cut of Tabu delivered exactly the story Murnau wanted, a beautiful, cinematic elegy where two young lovers seal their doom by breaking a sacred law. With the film complete, the timeline pivots back to America. It is March 1931, and Murnau is preparing for the film's highly anticipated premiere in New York City. But he would never see the premiere. While driving along the Pacific Coast Highway, the 42-year-old director was suddenly killed in a fatal car crash. The timing was haunting. The accident occurred precisely 1 week before Tabu was set to open to the public. For a director whose entire body of work obsessed over the themes of fate and the spiritual transition of death, the suddenness of his passing carried a heavy irony. The suffocating, inescapable doom that Murnau fought so aggressively to capture on camera had unexpectedly manifested in his own life. When the doors finally opened at the Central Park Theater, the atmosphere was completely overshadowed by the director's death. The audience knew they were looking at a dead man's final vision. That morbid context transformed the viewing experience. The audience sat in the dark watching a ghost story unfold, a shimmer of light from a creator who had already vanished. The film did achieve ultimate artistic validation. It won an Academy Award for its breathtaking cinematography, proving that Murnau's relentless push for visual perfection had paid off. Yet its historical significance extends beyond the trophy. Tabu acts as a majestic final bridge, connecting the era of silent expression to the arrival of the talkies. Friedrich Wilhelm Murnau spent his life chasing cinematic truth. He finally captured it, right at the edge of the ocean, just as his own timeline came to an end. This was brought to you by Stalls or Circle. Thank you for listening.